I never thought I'd be here writing this, but sometimes life throws you into the darkest pits when you least expect it. My name is Jack, I'm 45, and life had always been pretty good to me. I had a successful car repair shop that I owned, a decent amount of money in the bank, and a seemingly happy marriage with my wife, Laura, who's 40. But all that changed on a bleak December day when I received news that it started with a headache, just a simple, nagging headache that wouldn't go away. I thought it was just stress or maybe a migraine. But as the days went by, the pain intensified, so I decided to see a doctor. They ran some tests, and I waited, thinking they would just prescribe some strong painkillers. Instead, I got a diagnosis that shattered my world. Stage 4 brain cancer, terminal. The doctor said I had about 2 to 3 months left. There was no point in treating it as the cancer was too advanced. The words echoed in my mind, bouncing around like some cruel joke. 2 to 3 months. Driving home, I felt a surreal calmness wash over me, like the eye of a storm. I had to tell Laura. She needed to know, so we could make the most of the time I had left. I imagined her reaction, the tears, the comforting words, the plans we'd make to spend every last moment together. But life, as it turns out, had one more cruel surprise in store for me. When I pulled into the driveway earlier than usual, I noticed a strange car parked outside our house. It was a flashy, expensive car, the kind that screamed midlife crisis. My heart sank, but I shrugged it off, hoping it belonged to a delivery guy or a distant relative dropping by unannounced. I walked into the house quietly, intending to surprise Laura. The house was eerily silent, except for some faint noises coming from upstairs. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached our bedroom, the noises became clearer, muffled voices and the unmistakable sound of laughter. My stomach churned and I pressed my ear to the door. Laura and another man were talking and laughing, their voices filled with an intimacy that cut through me like a knife. "Can you believe he bought that?" the man said, chuckling. Laura's voice followed, light and carefree. "I know, right? He's so gullible, but it's all going to come crashing down soon." I felt a rage boiling inside me, a mixture of betrayal and disgust. I couldn't listen anymore. I turned and walked out, silently closing the door behind me. I needed to get out of there to clear my head. I drove straight to my auto repair shop, where my best friend Dave was working on a car. Dave and I had known each other since high school. He didn't have an office, just a desk in the corner of the auto repair shop where he handled paperwork. He worked alongside me, and in his free time, he was a tech genius. If there was anyone who could help me through this mess, it was him. Dave greeted me with his usual cheerful demeanor, but his smile faded when he saw my face. "Jack, what's wrong?" I told him everything. The cancer, Laura's affair, how I caught them in our bed. He listened quietly, his expression shifting from shock to anger and finally to sadness. "Jack, man, I am so sorry," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I can't imagine what you're going through, but you don't have to go through it alone. We'll figure something out." We sat at his desk, talking late into the night. I told him about my plan to expose Laura, to make sure her friends and family knew what kind of person she really was. Dave was all in, offering his expertise to help me set up a plan. "I have some ideas," Dave said, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and anger. "We can use hidden cameras, maybe even some spyware. If she's been doing this for months, there has to be more evidence." We spent the next few hours planning everything out. Dave handed me a small camera, perfectly disguised as a decorative item. "Put this near something that won't arouse suspicion, like a vase of flowers." I nodded, taking the camera. "And the spyware?" Dave pulled out a small USB drive. "This has a virus program on it. Install it on her phone. It will let us track her location and hear everything around her. You'll know exactly where she is and what she's doing." The hardest part was pretending everything was normal when I returned home. Laura tried to act as if nothing had happened, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. I avoided her as much as possible, focusing on the auto repair shop and spending time with Dave. When I walked into the house, Laura was in the kitchen, cooking dinner. She turned to me, her face lighting up with a smile that now felt like a lie. "Hey, you're home early," she said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, had a long day. Needed to talk to Dave about some things," I replied, forcing a smile. "Dinner smells good." As we ate, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Laura chatted about her day, her voice a constant reminder of her betrayal. I nodded along, barely hearing her words. All I could think about was the plan, the moment when I would reveal her true colors to everyone she held dear. After dinner, I went to my office, pretending to catch up on some work. In reality, I was waiting for the right moment to set up the camera and install the spyware. Laura went to bed early, claiming she was tired. I took the opportunity to place the hidden camera near a vase of flowers in the living room, positioning it so it had a clear view of the room. Next, I went to our bedroom, where Laura's phone was charging on the nightstand. I quickly connected the USB drive to her phone and installed the virus program, making sure everything was set up correctly. Once it was done, I returned to my office and connected my laptop to the spyware. I could see her location and listen to everything around her phone. It was both exhilarating and heartbreaking. The next morning, I told Laura I needed to go to the auto repair shop early to deal with some urgent repairs. She nodded, barely looking up from her coffee. As I drove to the auto repair shop, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. But I had to do this, for myself. When I got to the auto repair shop, Dave was already there, tinkering with an engine. "Morning, Jack. How are you holding up?" "Better," I lied. "Got everything set up?" "Yep, all ready to go. We just need to get the final pieces of evidence." We spent the day working on cars, a familiar routine that brought a semblance of normalcy to my chaotic life. But my mind was constantly on Laura, on the betrayal, on the plan. That evening, I returned home with a heavy heart. Laura was waiting for me, her face a mask of concern. "Jack, we need to talk." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Yes, we do." We sat in the living room, the tension thick in the air. Laura fidgeted with her hands, avoiding my gaze. "Jack, I've been meaning to tell you something." "Save it, Laura," I said, my voice cold and detached. "I already know." She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I know about you and Mark. I know about the affair." Her face paled and she stammered. "Jack, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," I cut her off. "I heard everything. I saw everything." Laura's shoulders slumped and she began to cry. "Jack, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." I stood up, unable to bear her tears. "It's too late for apologies, Laura. I've got a plan and you're going to pay for what you've done." She looked up at me, fear and confusion etched on her face. "What are you going to do?" "You'll see," I said, turning to leave the room. "You and everyone else will see." Thanks for reading part 2. The days following my confrontation with Laura were a blur of cold determination. I had to collect as much evidence as possible, not only to expose her infidelity, but also to protect my assets from her grasp. While Laura carried on as if nothing had happened, I spent my nights reviewing the footage from the hidden camera and listening to the conversations captured by the spyware on her phone. Each day I headed to the auto repair shop, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Dave and I continued working side by side, but I knew I had to prepare him for the future. He needed to be ready to take over the shop when I was gone. Teaching him the intricacies of managing the workers and the business became my primary focus. "Dave, you've got to be on top of inventory," I said one afternoon as we reviewed the shop's stock. "Make sure you always have the essentials. Running out of parts can ruin a good day's work." Dave nodded, absorbing every detail. "Got it, Jack. I won't let you down." In the evenings, when I returned home, I would retreat to my office and review the latest recordings. Laura was growing bolder with each passing day, her conversations with Mark becoming more explicit and damning. They often met in our house, taking advantage of my supposed ignorance. Little did they know, every word they spoke was being recorded. One night, I heard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. Laura was talking to Mark about my health. "Jack doesn't have much time left," she said, her voice cold and calculating. "Once he's gone, all his property will be mine. We can sell the auto repair shop and the house and start our new life together." Mark's response was equally heartless. "That's great, babe. We can finally be together without hiding." Laura laughed, a sound that now felt like nails on a chalkboard. "Just a little longer, and we'll have everything we ever wanted." Hearing her plan to take everything I'd worked for and build a new life with another man ignited a fire in me. I couldn't let her get away with it. I started documenting everything meticulously, creating a comprehensive file of their conversations, videos, and messages. I hired a lawyer, Charles, who came highly recommended. He was known for his tenacity and skill in court. Charles was appalled by Laura's behavior. "Jack, we're going to make sure she gets nothing," he assured me. "We'll use every piece of evidence you've gathered to show the court exactly what kind of person she is." The days flew by, and before I knew it, New Year's Eve was upon us. Laura and I had planned a gathering with our friends to celebrate what would likely be my last New Year. It was a bittersweet occasion, knowing that everyone was there to make my final months memorable while I carried the heavy burden of Laura's betrayal. The house was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I forced myself to join in the festivities, to put on a brave face for the sake of my friends. Laura was the perfect hostess, her smile never wavering as if nothing was amiss. It was infuriating to watch her deceive everyone so effortlessly. During the party, I couldn't help but think about the contrast between appearances and reality. To our friends, Laura and I seemed like the perfect couple, celebrating the new year together despite my grim prognosis. But I knew the truth, and soon enough, so would everyone else. As midnight approached, I found myself alone on the back porch looking up at the stars. The weight of everything I'd discovered pressed heavily on my shoulders. The realization that this would be my last New Year's Eve was sobering. The cold air stung my lungs, a reminder of my dwindling time. Dave joined me outside, handing me a glass of whiskey. "Thought you could use this," he said, his voice filled with concern. "Thanks, Dave," I replied, taking a sip. The warmth of the liquor did little to ease the chill in my bones. "You doing okay?" he asked, leaning against the railing. I sighed, looking out into the darkness. "I don't know. It's hard to pretend everything's fine when it's not." Dave nodded. "I can't imagine what you're going through, Jack. But you're strong. You'll get through this." "Yeah," I muttered, taking another sip. "I just hope this plan works. I can't let her take everything." "It will," Dave said firmly. "We've got all the evidence. She won't get away with it." The clock struck midnight, and the sound of fireworks erupted in the distance. Dave and I raised our glasses, clinking them together in a silent toast. "Happy New Year, Jack," he said. "Happy New Year, Dave." Inside, our friends were cheering and hugging, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Laura spotted me through the window and waved, her smile bright and seemingly genuine. I forced myself to wave back, hiding the turmoil inside. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Laura and I found ourselves alone. She approached me, her expression softening. "Jack, I hope this year brings us closer together," she said, her voice tinged with false sincerity. I swallowed my anger, forcing a smile. "Yeah, Laura, me too." With the house finally quiet, I retreated to my office, where the files and recordings were neatly organized. I reviewed the latest entries, adding more evidence to the growing pile. Every word, every action was meticulously documented. I was building an airtight case, ensuring that when the time came, there would be no doubt about Laura's betrayal. In the following weeks, I focused on teaching Dave everything he needed to know about running the auto repair shop. We went over the books, discussed management strategies, and I introduced him to all our regular clients. Dave absorbed it all, determined to honor my legacy and keep the business thriving. "Jack, I've got this," he said one evening as we closed up the shop. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't, Dave," I replied, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're going to do great." Meanwhile, Laura continued her charade, blissfully unaware that her every move was being monitored. She met with Mark regularly, discussing their plans for the future and reveling in their deceit. Each conversation added another layer to the mountain of evidence against her. Charles and I met frequently to discuss the case. He was relentless, leaving no stone unturned. "We're going to destroy her in court," he said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "She won't know what hit her." As the weeks turned into months, I felt my strength waning. The cancer was taking its toll, and I knew my time was running out, but I refused to give in. I had to see this through, to make sure Laura faced the consequences of her actions. One evening, as I reviewed the latest recordings, I heard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Laura was speaking with Mark about my declining health. "He's getting worse," she said, her tone almost gleeful. "It won't be long now. Soon everything will be ours." Mark chuckled. "I can't wait, babe. We're going to have it all." I clenched my fists, my resolve hardening. They were counting down the days, eagerly anticipating my death so they could take everything I had worked for. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I doubled my efforts, working closely with Charles to finalize our strategy. We gathered statements from friends and colleagues, building a case that would leave no doubt about Laura's infidelity and her plans to take over my assets. The more evidence we collected, the stronger our case became. As my health continued to deteriorate, I found solace in the fact that justice would soon be served. Laura's betrayal had cut deep, but the thought of exposing her and protecting my legacy kept me going. I knew that even if I didn't live to see the outcome, I had done everything in my power to ensure that she didn't get away with her treachery. Part 3. As the weeks turned into months, my condition worsened. The headaches became more frequent, pounding relentlessly both day and night. The medication offered temporary relief, dulling the pain just enough for me to function, but the cancer was taking its toll, and I could feel my strength slipping away. Laura, meanwhile, carried on with her life as if nothing had changed. Her affair with Mark had hit a rough patch, and they had a heated argument that ended with him storming out. But Laura, ever resourceful, soon found herself another lover. I watched their interactions through the hidden cameras and listened to their conversations, each one a knife to my heart. One evening, I overheard Laura talking to her new lover on the phone. "I can't wait for Jack to be out of the picture," she said, her voice dripping with impatience. "Then we can finally be together without sneaking around." Her lover laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "Just a little longer, darling. We'll have everything we ever wanted." Hearing this only fueled my resolve. Despite the pain and the constant reminders of Laura's betrayal, I threw myself into preparing for the endgame. I gathered more evidence, working closely with Charles to build an ironclad case against her. But I also knew that I couldn't spend my last days consumed by anger and revenge. I needed to find some peace and joy in the time I had left. So I decided to travel, to see the parts of the world I had always dreamed of visiting. With Charles handling the legal preparations and Dave managing the auto repair shop, I set off on a journey that took me to some of the most beautiful places on Earth. I began my travels in Europe, wandering the cobbled streets of Paris, standing in awe of the ancient ruins in Rome, and sailing through the sun-kissed canals of Venice. Each city had its own charm, its own story, and for brief moments I could forget about the cancer and the betrayal waiting for me back home. The Alps were next, their snow-capped peaks a breathtaking sight. I spent my days skiing down the slopes, the cold mountain air invigorating and refreshing. It was during one of these moments of tranquility that I realized how much I had missed out on while being consumed by work and the daily grind. Life was meant to be lived, not just endured. From the Alps, I journeyed to the exotic locales of Thailand and Bali. The beaches were pristine, the waters crystal clear. I swam in the warm ocean, relaxed on the sandy shores, and even tried my hand at surfing. The locals were friendly, their smiles infectious, and their way of life a stark contrast to the stress and chaos I had left behind. Yet, even in these moments of peace, my thoughts often drifted back to Laura and the life I once knew. I wondered how she was doing, what schemes she was concocting in my absence. The spyware on her phone kept me informed, but it was a double-edged sword, bringing both comfort and pain. I knew everything she did, and it was as if I was living a dual life, one of adventure and one of betrayal. One night in Portugal, while sitting on a secluded beach, I witnessed something extraordinary. A meteor streaked across the sky, its bright tail lighting up the darkness. It was a breathtaking sight, one that filled me with a sense of wonder and awe. For a moment, I felt a connection to something greater, a reminder that life, with all its pain and joy, was fleeting and beautiful. The next day, the internet was buzzing about the meteor. People from all over the world had seen it, and social media was flooded with pictures and videos. It was a shared experience, a moment of unity in a world often divided. I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope, even amidst my personal turmoil. Back home, Laura's life was unraveling in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Her relationships were strained, her lovers growing tired of the deception and secrecy. I watched as she tried to juggle her double life, the cracks in her facade growing more evident with each passing day. She was losing control, and it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. But for now, I focused on making the most of my remaining days. I continued to explore new places, each destination offering a new perspective on life. The serene temples of Japan, the bustling markets of Morocco, the vibrant streets of Brazil, each place left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder that there was still beauty and joy to be found in the world. In those quiet moments of reflection, I often thought about you, dear reader. I wondered if you had ever experienced betrayal or heartache, if you had ever felt the weight of the world pressing down on your shoulders. Life has a way of testing us, of pushing us to our limits, but it's in those moments of darkness that we find our true strength, our resilience. I found solace in the kindness of strangers, in the breathtaking beauty of nature, and in the simple joys of life. Each day was a gift, a chance to create new memories and to find peace amidst the chaos. I learned to let go of the anger and bitterness, to embrace the fleeting moments of happiness and to cherish the time I had left. The journey was far from over, and there were still battles to be fought, both in the courtroom and within my own heart. But for now, I was content to live each day to the fullest, to find joy in the little things, and to continue my quest for justice. Part 4. Summer had arrived, bringing with it the heavy, humid air and the scent of blooming flowers. For me, it was a reminder that my time was running out. My condition had deteriorated to the point where I could do little more than lie down and take medicine to dull the constant, excruciating headaches. It was a miserable existence, but I was determined to see my plan through to the end. Charles, my lawyer, was a constant presence during these days. He meticulously prepared the documents needed to sue Laura, ensuring every detail was perfect. His dedication was a comfort, knowing that even after I was gone, justice would be served. Dave and Laura spent these final days with me, though their reasons were starkly different. Dave was there out of genuine friendship and loyalty, while Laura's presence was a facade, a poor attempt to maintain the image of a caring wife. Despite everything, she continued to play her role, perhaps believing that her deception would hold until the end. One sweltering afternoon, Laura went into the house, leaving Dave and me alone in the backyard. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over the garden. I turned to Dave, my voice weak but resolute. "Dave, promise me something," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "If I don't make it, you need to finish what we started. Make sure she doesn't get away with it." Dave nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "I promise, Jack. I'll see it through, and I'll take care of the shop. You can count on me." It was a relief to know that Dave would be there to continue the fight. He had become more than just a friend. He was my confidant and my strongest ally. As the weeks passed, he took over the daily operations of the auto repair shop, proving himself to be a capable leader. The workers respected him, and the clients trusted him. The business was in good hands. Dave's daughter often visited the shop, her presence a bright spot in those dark days. She was a cheerful child, full of life and curiosity. Watching her play around the shop reminded me of the innocence and joy that still existed in the world, despite my personal turmoil. Meanwhile, Laura began to collect my things, preparing to sell all my property. She was confident that everything would soon belong to her. I watched her go through my belongings with a cold detachment, knowing that her time was running out. She had no idea what was coming. In August, everything I had planned for the last months of my life began to unfold. Charles filed the lawsuit against Laura, claiming $245,000 in moral compensation, and ensuring she had no right to my property or money due to her infidelity. The case was airtight, backed by the mountain of evidence we had gathered. The day of the court hearing arrived, and the atmosphere was charged with tension. Laura walked into the courtroom with an air of confidence, believing she was about to secure her future. Her smirk quickly faded as Charles began presenting the evidence. Video and audio recordings played on the screen, each one more damning than the last. Laura's eyes widened in shock as she realized the extent of the betrayal she was now facing. Friends and family, both hers and mine, sat in the courtroom, their expressions a mix of disbelief and anger. The room was silent, save for the sounds of Laura's infidelities and her callous conversations with her lovers. As the evidence mounted, Laura's confidence crumbled. She began to shout, her voice rising in hysteria. "This is a lie! All of it! Jack, how could you do this to me?" But the truth was undeniable. The court saw through her desperate attempts to deflect and deceive. The judge reviewed the evidence, his expression stern and unforgiving. Laura's outbursts grew more frantic, her anger turning to fear and then to outright panic. She started throwing things, her screams echoing through the courtroom. "This isn't fair. He's lying. You're all against me." Her hysteria only solidified the court's perception of her true character. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "Mrs. Henderson, control yourself or you will be removed from this courtroom." Charles stood, his voice calm and authoritative. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. Mrs. Henderson's actions are a clear violation of her marital vows and a gross betrayal of my client, Mr. Henderson. We ask the court to grant the full amount of moral compensation and to strip Mrs. Henderson of any claim to Mr. Henderson's property and assets." The judge nodded, his eyes fixed on Laura. "The court recognizes the rightness of Mr. Henderson's claims. Mrs. Henderson, you are hereby ordered to pay $245,000 in moral compensation. Additionally, you forfeit any claim to Mr. Henderson's property and assets due to your infidelity." Laura collapsed into her seat, sobbing uncontrollably. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs of approval and relief. Justice had been served. But before we reached this point, there were long days and nights filled with pain and planning. Let me take you back a bit, dear reader, to give you a fuller picture of those final summer days. Every day was a struggle. The headaches were relentless, each one feeling like a hammer to my skull. The medication provided some relief, but it was only temporary. There were moments when the pain was so intense that I could barely think, let alone continue with my plans. But I pushed through, driven by a need for justice and closure. Laura's relationship with Mark deteriorated quickly. Their quarrels became more frequent and intense, with accusations and resentment flying back and forth. I watched their relationship implode, a small comfort in the midst of my suffering. But Laura was nothing if not resourceful. She soon found another lover, continuing her pattern of deceit and betrayal. During this time, I took solace in my travels. I wanted to see as much of the world as possible before my time ran out. I visited places I had only dreamed of: Paris, Rome, Venice, the Alps, Thailand, and Bali. Each destination offered a brief escape from my reality, a chance to experience life's beauty one last time. In Portugal, I witnessed a meteor streak across the night sky, a brilliant display of nature's power and beauty. The next day, the entire internet was buzzing about the phenomenon. It was a reminder of how small and insignificant our personal dramas are in the grand scheme of things. But even as I marveled at the world's wonders, my thoughts often drifted back to Laura and the betrayal that awaited me at home. The spyware on her phone kept me informed of her every move, every deceitful word she spoke. It was a constant reminder of the life I was leaving behind and the justice I sought. When I returned from my travels, I found some comfort in the familiarity of the auto repair shop. Dave was doing an excellent job running the business, his dedication and skill evident in every aspect of the shop's operations. His daughter's presence was a bright spot in those dark days, her laughter a reminder of the innocence and joy that still existed in the world. As summer progressed, Laura grew bolder in her preparations to take over my property. She began collecting my things, confident that she would soon have everything she desired. Little did she know that her world was about to come crashing down. The evidence we had gathered was irrefutable. Video and audio recordings, text messages, and witness statements all painted a clear picture of Laura's infidelity and betrayal. Charles and I worked tirelessly to ensure that every detail was covered, every piece of evidence accounted for. As the court date approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. This was the culmination of months of planning and suffering. I knew that once the truth was revealed, there would be no going back. Laura's carefully constructed facade would crumble, and she would face the consequences of her actions. On the day of the hearing, the tension was palpable. Laura walked into the courtroom with an air of confidence, believing she was about to secure her future. But as Charles began presenting the evidence, her demeanor changed. The videos and audio recordings left no room for doubt. Her lies and deceit were laid bare for all to see. Friends and family, both hers and mine, watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded. The betrayal was evident in every word, every action captured on tape. Laura's confidence evaporated, replaced by panic and desperation. As the evidence mounted, Laura's outbursts grew more frantic. She shouted, pleaded, and accused, but it was too late. The truth was undeniable. The judge reviewed the evidence, his expression stern and unyielding. Throughout the ordeal, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice was being served, but the cost had been high. My health was failing, and the pain was a constant reminder of my limited time. But knowing that Laura would face the consequences of her actions gave me some measure of peace. This is Dave. If you have listened to this point, thank you for spending time on our story. I want to tell you with joy that Jack is miraculously alive. We all thought that this was the end, But after 6 months, Jack felt better and he went to the hospital and the doctors told him that it was a mistake in the equipment and the headaches and his bad condition was caused by stress and worry. He is doing well now he is traveling and he left the workshop to me, and I give him half of the workshop's monthly income. Thanks again for watching. With love, Dave.